But good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, wherever you're located. I'm Sarah Harlan. I'm the Partnerships Team Lead for Knowledge Success, and I'll be talking about how to hold a virtual peer assist. So first, I will describe the peer assist approach and when it's best used, and then I'll talk about how to adapt it for the virtual setting. And in the meantime, if you can look at the poll question, and we will let people know the results of the poll. But I first want to say about the peer assist approach that it's one of my favorite knowledge management techniques because they really focus on concrete sharing of more experiential or tacit knowledge, that know-how that's often in people's heads and hard to express. And the peer assist is structured and you plan in advance for what you want to know, but it also allows for real-time brainstorming and creativity. So it's a nice mix of different thinking approaches that can bring about some important solutions for teams who might be new to implementation or struggling with a challenge. So if you can go to, if we have the slides fixed, if you could go to the next slide. If not, I will keep going. So there are a few benefits of doing a peer assist. They're very efficient. They can be done in a relatively short amount of time, roughly an hour or a little bit more. They can be planned and executed quickly, and knowledge can be put into practice immediately. They're very targeted and practical. They focus on a specific task or technical challenge, and they allow for innovation. So teams can gain assistance and insights from people outside of their team, people they might not normally interact with. And they really help teams identify creative approaches. Great, so it looks like we have the slide working. If you could go to the next slide. Okay, great. So when should you organize a peer assist? They are best done with small groups, so ideally no more than 20 people or even as few as 5 people. And you want the learning team, which is the team asking questions, to be small, so no more than about 3 people. And there can be more participants in the sharing team, which is the team offering advice. But I'd still advise to keep it fairly small so that you can collate all of the responses and really make sense of the advice that's being given. And it's best when there's a clear question or challenge to address. So I wouldn't want to do this if the project is far away from being launched, or if it's so close to closing that you can't implement the suggestions. So peer assists are often done at the launch of a new project or initiative, but once there's some clear questions to ask. And it can be done virtually with careful planning, which I will talk about in a minute. If you could go to the next slide, please. So I covered this. There are several benefits of the peer assist. So let's go to the next slide. So these are the 6 steps of a peer assist. So first, the learning team presents their context. They keep it short, no more than 5 minutes, and they really focus on the main challenges and the main questions being asked. And then the sharing team considers the problem and asks clarifying questions. Next, the sharing team brainstorms what the learning team needs to know and where they can find that knowledge. After that, all participants reflect and discuss options, and then the sharing team individually presents their feedback, suggestions, and advice to the learning team. And the advice is presented informally, and the facilitator makes sure that the advice is kept short and succinct. And during this process, a note taker carefully captures each suggestion. And the last step is that all participants reflect on what they learned. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So here are some of our recommendations for adapting the approach to the virtual setting. So just first, some technical considerations. We recommend connecting through a platform that has video, audio, chat, and screen sharing functions. So something like Zoom, Adobe Connect, or GoToMeeting works really well for peer assists. Next slide, please. And here's how you can adapt the 6 peer assist steps for a virtual setting. So for step 1, the learning team presents the context. We recommend using video and visuals or short slide presentations to help present the context. For step 2, the sharing team asks clarifying questions. They can do this via audio, video, or chat. Next slide. For step 3, the sharing team brainstorms what knowledge the learning team needs. Again, this can be via audio, video, and chat. This part may need some facilitation, and teams can potentially use Google Doc or another method to keep organized. So this part can be a little bit tricky during the virtual setting just because you're not in the same room, you can't use a flip chart or that sort of thing. So you need to really think ahead to make sure that all participants are seeing the same information. And for step 4, all participants reflect and discuss their options. So this is where the sharing team really gets their thoughts in order and prepares for step 5. Next slide. So for step 5, the sharing team presents their suggestions and advice via video, audio, and chat. And again, they present these individually, and they can build off the previous presenter. The facilitator is really important in this step to make sure that the participants keep their advice brief, focused, and concrete. And finally, for step 6, participants reflect on key learnings, discuss how to share documents, and how to follow up as needed. Next slide. So here's some general tips for preparing and hosting a virtual peer assist. It's important to set up planning calls with the learning team to make sure that they're clear and they're focused on what they're actually asking advice to do. Make sure that the right people are invited. So carefully select the sharing team of experts who have relevant experience and will understand what's being asked of them. Make sure that everybody's roles are clear. And the learning team should practice telling their story so that it's short and that it clearly articulates the challenge, and that the sharing team can really have time to reflect on that. We reflect briefing the sharing team in advance about the learning team's project and purpose, etc., to save time on the day of the actual peer assist. Next slide. It's also important to have a facilitator and a note taker, preferably someone neutral and not associated with either group, to keep the group on task and to capture the discussion. And you can use a virtual note-taking platform, even just a Google Doc, as I mentioned before, to stay organized and on task. We also recommend allowing some time at the beginning of the peer assist for introductions and icebreakers, because unlike an in-person meeting, there's not that time where people are getting their coffee and their breakfast to kind of establish some rapport and get to know each other. So it's important to kind of schedule that into a virtual meeting. We also recommend using video if possible so the participants can see facial expressions and body language. And we also recommend scheduling informal follow-up meetings to check in and see how the learning team progresses with the advice that they're given. Next slide. So finally, here's some resources we recommend to help you plan your peer assist. And most importantly, have fun. Peer assists are a great way to build your network and to share learning with your colleagues. And if you do plan one virtually, please let us know how it goes. We'd love to hear from you and learn any tips that you might have.